They sent him a bride they called useless, but she built the greatest ranch in Montana. The first warning came before the bride ever did. A black horse rode into the yard at Iron Creek Ranch just after sunrise, its rider bent low in the saddle, his coat white with trail dust and his face stiff from the long road. Wade Harrington saw him from the fence line, where he was tightening a loose rail with cold hands and a tired back. The May wind moved across the Montana grass like it had something to whisper, and for a moment, even the cattle seemed to quiet. The rider did not ask for coffee. He did not ask to rest. He only handed Wade a sealed letter. From Virginia City, the rider said. Came through Helena first. They paid extra to get it here fast. Wade wiped his hands on his work shirt before taking it. The envelope was thick, expensive, and sealed with red wax. The name written across the front was his, but the handwriting belonged to a world he had tried hard to forget. Harrington. Not Wade. Not Mr. Wade. Just Harrington, like a business line in a ledger. Mrs. Ruth Hensley, the widow who kept house at Iron Creek, stood in the doorway with her flour-covered hands pressed into her apron. She had been with Wade long enough to know that some letters carried more weight than iron. "Bad news?" she asked. Wade did not answer right away. He broke the wax seal with his thumb. The paper inside smelled faintly of perfume and city smoke, a strange smell out there among hay, cattle, leather, and dust. His eyes moved over the first line. Then his jaw tightened. Mrs. Hensley took one step onto the porch. "Mr. Harrington." Wade read the letter again, slower this time, though every word struck him just as hard. The Whitmore family of Virginia City was reminding him of an agreement made 7 years ago, back when Iron Creek had nearly dried to bone and Wade had borrowed money to save his herd. He had signed papers. He had promised marriage into the Whitmore line if the debt could not be paid by harvest of the 7th year. He had hated that bargain from the moment he made it. But a man did desperate things when cattle were dying, wells were low, and every rancher in the territory was waiting for him to fail. The letter did not mention kindness. It did not mention understanding. It spoke of terms, obligations, settlement, and honor. Then came the sentence that made the wind feel colder. "Miss Eleanor Whitmore will arrive by stage in Miles Crossing on the 15th of June, where you will receive her as your promised bride." Wade stared past the paper toward the wide open country he had fought for most of his life. Iron Creek spread before him in long brown-green waves, 15,000 acres of grass, creek bed, cottonwoods, corrals, barns, and broken dreams patched together by stubborn hands. He had built it from a ruined claim and a handful of half-starved cattle. Now it had strong horses, deep wells, and a name that made other ranchers nod with respect. But the ranch was still fragile. More fragile than anyone knew. A bad winter, one poor cattle sale, one crooked buyer, and Iron Creek could crack open like dry earth. Mrs. Hensley came down from the porch and stopped beside him. "They're sending the bride." Wade looked at her, not the one they first promised. The old woman's mouth pressed thin. "Which one?" He folded the letter once, then unfolded it again like he hoped the name would change. "Eleanor." Mrs. Hensley's eyes sharpened. She knew the name. Everybody who had ever passed through Virginia City knew some piece of the Whitmore gossip. There were 3 daughters. The eldest had married money. The second had married influence. The youngest, Eleanor, was the one people spoke of with little smiles and cruel voices. Too soft. Too bookish. Too strange. Raised in comfort, useless in work, always carrying papers, always asking questions no proper young woman was meant to ask. A daughter who had become an embarrassment to a proud family. "They're sending her to punish you," Mrs. Hensley said quietly. Wade looked toward the barn, where one of the younger hands was leading a bay mare into the yard. The horse tossed its head, sensing tension before any person admitted it. "Maybe," Wade said, "or to get rid of her." Mrs. Hensley crossed her arms. "And what will you do?" Wade gave a short, humorless breath. "Ride to Miles Crossing on June 15th. You could fight it." "I signed my name." "You signed under pressure. A signature still counts." Mrs. Hensley studied him with the tired patience of a woman who had watched good men carry burdens they never should have lifted. "A wife is not a sack of feed, Wade. She is not something they can ship west and call the debt settled." "No," he said, folding the letter carefully and sliding it into his coat pocket. "But she is coming all the same." For the rest of that day, Iron Creek kept working, but something had changed. Wade felt it in the way the men glanced at him and looked away. News moved fast on a ranch. By supper, every hand knew a city bride was coming. By nightfall, half of them had decided she would not last a week. At the long table in the bunkhouse, young Danny Pike laughed into his coffee. "A Whitmore girl out here. Bet she faints at the smell of a branding fire." Another hand said, "She'll take one look at the dust and cry for a feather bed." Wade stood in the doorway, unseen for a moment. The lantern behind the men threw long shadows across the plank floor. "She will be treated with respect," he said. Every voice stopped. Danny swallowed. "I didn't mean nothing by it, boss." "Yes, you did," Wade answered, "and you'll mean less next time." The men lowered their eyes. Wade turned and walked back out into the night. He did not defend Eleanor because he knew her. He defended her because he knew what it felt like to be judged before speaking one honest word. The stars above Montana were sharp and cold that night. Wade crossed the yard slowly, boots dragging dust, and stopped beside the empty guest room window. Mrs. Hensley had already begun airing it out, beating old curtains clean, setting fresh quilts across the bed, placing a small blue pitcher on the washstand. It looked too gentle for the storm coming with it. Wade stood there a long while. He had no room in his life for a helpless wife. He had no time to comfort a spoiled woman who had been raised among chandeliers and parlor music. He needed rain, fair prices, strong fences, loyal men, and a little mercy from heaven. But the letter in his pocket felt heavier than all of it. 3 weeks passed like a slow rope tightening. Wade worked harder than usual. He rode farther, slept less, and spoke only when needed. Every evening he took out the Whitmore letter and read that name again. Eleanor. He tried to picture her and saw only trouble. A pale dress stepping into mud. A soft voice complaining of cold. A pair of hands that had never held anything rougher than a silver spoon. On the morning of June 15th, Wade hitched the buckboard before dawn. Mrs. Hensley packed bread, dried apples, and coffee in a cloth bundle. She watched him climb onto the seat. "Try not to meet her with your mind already made," she said. Wade gathered the reins. "I'm only going to honor a debt." Mrs. Hensley gave him a sad look. Sometimes a debt brings more than a man expects. Miles Crossing was crowded by noon. Miners, cattle buyers, drifters, and merchants filled the street. The stage station sat beside the blacksmith shop, its signs swinging in the dry wind. Wade waited near the hitching rail with his hat low over his eyes. At 3 o'clock, the stage appeared in a cloud of dust. It rolled in hard, wheels creaking, horses lathered, driver cursing under his breath. Passengers climbed down one by one. A traveling salesman, a mother with 2 children, an old preacher, a nervous-looking clerk. Then the last passenger stepped out. Wade straightened. She was not what he expected. Eleanor Whitmore wore a plain brown traveling dress, dusty at the hem, with no feathers, no silk, no grand city airs. Her dark hair was pinned neatly but coming loose from the long road. She carried one leather bag in her left hand and a square wooden case tucked under her right arm. Her face was tired but not weak. Her eyes found Wade in the crowd almost at once. She looked at his worn coat, his sun-browned face, the dust on his boots, the hard set of his mouth. Then she walked straight toward him. "Mr. Harrington?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but one hand trembled slightly on the handle of her bag. Wade tipped his hat. "Miss Whitmore." She took a breath, as if she had practiced her first words for miles and still feared they might fail her. "My family has likely told you I am useless," she said. Wade said nothing. Eleanor lifted her chin. "Before you believe them, I ask one thing." "What is that?" "Give me 30 days to prove they were wrong." Wade looked at the dusty young woman standing before him, sent west like a punishment, holding herself together with pride and fear. And for the first time since the letter arrived, Iron Creek Ranch no longer felt like the only thing in danger. It felt like she was too. For a moment, Wade Harrington forgot the noise of miles crossing around him. The stage driver was unloading trunks. Horses stamped near the water trough. A man outside the saloon laughed too loudly at something no one else found funny, but Wade heard only the woman's words. "Give me 30 days to prove they were wrong." There was no pleading in her voice, no softness asking for pity. Yet Wade saw the truth in the way Eleanor Whitmore held that leather bag too tightly, as if it was the last thing in the world that belonged to her. 30 days, Wade repeated. "Yes," she said. "After that, if you believe I am a burden, I will not argue." His eyes narrowed. "Where would you go?" Her mouth moved, but no answer came. That silence told him more than any speech could have. Eleanor Whitmore had crossed half the country with one bag, one wooden case, and no sure road back. Her family had not sent her west with safety. They had sent her away. Wade reached for her bag. She pulled it back by instinct. "I can carry it," she said. "I did not say you could not." Her cheeks colored, not from shame, but from being ready to fight a battle he had not offered. Slowly, she let him take the bag. It was lighter than he expected, too light for a woman starting a new life. "What's in the case?" he asked. Eleanor's arm tightened around the square wooden box. "My papers." "What kind of papers?" "The kind people ignore until they need them." Wade studied her a second longer, then turned toward the buckboard. "It is a long ride to Iron Creek." "I was told that." "You were told wrong if they made it sound easy." A faint trace of a smile touched her lips. "No one in my family has ever made anything sound easy unless someone else was doing it." That answer surprised him enough that he almost smiled back. Almost. They left Miles Crossing with the afternoon sun leaning west and the town shrinking behind them. The buckboard wheels rattled over hard ground. Eleanor sat beside him, straight-backed, one hand resting on her wooden case, the other gripping the seat whenever the road dipped. Dust lifted around them in soft brown clouds. For the first mile, neither spoke. Wade was used to silence. Silence was easier than wrong words. It had been his companion through drought, broken fences, empty rooms, and long winters where the only voice in the house was the stove settling at night. But Eleanor's silence was different. It was not empty. It was watchful. She looked at everything: the creek beds, the direction of the wind, the grass height, the scattered cattle in the distance, a leaning fence post, a cutbank where rain had washed soil away. Her eyes kept moving, not with fear but with sharp attention. At last she asked, "How far is your northern range?" Wade glanced at her. "Far." "How many acres?" "Enough to keep a man tired." "That is not an answer." "No, it is not." She turned her face toward the open land. "My father answers that way when he does not want someone knowing his affairs." Your father and I likely have little else in common. More than you think, she said softly. The words came with a weight Wade did not understand. He looked at her again, but she had lowered her eyes to the wooden case. A few miles later, the road passed a shallow wash where two of Wade's men were repairing a collapsed crossing. They looked up as the buckboard approached. One was Danny Pike, the hand who had laughed about Eleanor fainting at ranch smells. His grin began before he could stop it. Wade saw Eleanor see it. She did not ask why the man was smiling. She simply looked ahead and sat a little straighter. Danny took off his hat, but his eyes carried the kind of judgment men thought women could not read. "Boss," he called, "this the new Mrs. Harrington." Wade pulled the horses to a stop. "This is Miss Whitmore." Eleanor turned her head. "For today." Danny blinked. The other hand coughed into his sleeve. Wade's mouth tightened, but Eleanor continued before he could speak. "You have wash damage there," she said, pointing toward the crossing. "If you pack loose dirt against those stones, the next hard rain will take it again." Danny stared at her as if a saddle had spoken. Eleanor held his gaze. "Brush first, then stone, then clay, layer it tight." The older hand beside Danny scratched his chin. "She ain't wrong." Danny looked from Eleanor to Wade, unsure whether to laugh or apologize. Wade gathered the reins. "You heard her." They drove on. Eleanor did not look pleased with herself. She looked tired. Wade waited until the wash was behind them. "How did you know that?" "My uncle had a mill road that washed out every spring. Men repaired it badly for 6 years. I watched one old mason fix it right in one afternoon." "You remember a road repair from childhood." "I remember most things people do not think I am listening to." The answer settled between them. Wade had spent years learning the land by surviving it. Eleanor had learned by being underestimated in rooms where men spoke freely because they thought she was decoration. Maybe that made a different kind of schooling. By evening, Iron Creek appeared beyond a rise. The ranch house stood strong under the lowering sun, with its wide porch and weathered roof. The barn sat farther back, red paint faded by wind. Corrals spread to the east. Beyond them, cattle grazed in patches across the wide plain, dark bodies moving slowly in golden light. A pair of horses lifted their heads as the buckboard rolled into the yard. Eleanor grew very still. Wade watched her from the corner of his eye. This was the moment he had expected from the beginning. The disappointment, the fear, the first sign that Montana was too large, too rough, too plain, too honest for a woman raised in parlors. Instead, Eleanor whispered, "It has good bones." Wade frowned. "The house." "The ranch." Before he could answer, Mrs. Hensley came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a clean apron. Her gray hair was pinned tight, and her eyes went over Eleanor with care, not cruelty. Eleanor stepped down before Wade could help her. Her knees nearly gave from the long ride, but she caught herself on the buckboard and pretended nothing happened. Mrs. Hensley noticed. Wade noticed too. "Welcome to Iron Creek," Mrs. Hensley said. Eleanor lifted her chin. "Thank you, ma'am." "You must be hungry." "Yes," Eleanor said, "but I would like to wash first if that is allowed." Mrs. Hensley's face softened just a little. "Around here, washing is encouraged." For the first time, Eleanor truly smiled. It changed her face. Wade looked away faster than he meant to. Inside the house, Eleanor paused at the front room. It was clean but plain. A stone fireplace, 2 wooden chairs, a long table with scratches from years of use, a shelf of ledgers, a rifle mounted high over the mantel, a faded rug Mrs. Hensley had beaten clean that morning. Eleanor's eyes landed on the ledgers. Wade noticed. "Your room is upstairs," he said. She turned back to him. "My room." "For now." Something like relief passed over her face, so quick he might have missed it if he had not been watching. She nodded once. "Thank you." Those two words were simple, but they carried more than manners. They carried a fear he had not thought about. Wade felt a quiet shame rise in him. He had spent 3 weeks worrying she would be too soft for his ranch, never once asking what she might fear from him. Mrs. Hensley led Eleanor upstairs. Wade remained in the front room, hat in hand, staring at nothing. From above came the sound of a door opening, then the soft creak of floorboards. A few minutes later, water poured into a basin. The house seemed to hold its breath around the new presence inside it. That night's supper was quiet. Eleanor ate carefully, as if she had been raised never to show hunger, but the empty plate gave her away. Mrs. Hensley offered another piece of cornbread. Eleanor hesitated, then accepted. Wade saw her hand tremble when she reached for it. Not weakness, he thought. Exhaustion. After supper, Eleanor helped clear the table. Mrs. Hensley tried to stop her. "You are a guest tonight." Eleanor shook her head. "I have been a guest all my life. I would rather be useful." The kitchen went silent. Wade looked down at his coffee. There it was again, that word. Useful. As if it had chased her all the way from Virginia City to Miles Crossing, from the stage road to his table. Later, when Mrs. Hensley went to the pantry, Eleanor stepped into the front room and stood before the shelf of ledgers. "May I ask a question?" she said. "You have asked several. May I ask one that matters?" Wade leaned against the doorway. "Go on. How much does Iron Creek owe?" His expression hardened. "That is ranch business." Her eyes met his. "Tomorrow it becomes marriage business. The preacher has not come yet. But the debt already has." Wade said nothing. Eleanor took one small step closer to the ledgers. "My father did not send me here out of kindness. If he believes this ranch can be weakened through me, then he knows more about your accounts than I do. That means you have enemies reading your numbers while your own household does not." The words struck too close. Wade's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Outside, a horse shifted near the rail, and the sound of leather creaked in the dark. "How do you know my ranch has enemies?" he asked. Eleanor looked toward the window, where the last light had gone from the sky. "Because men like my father do not collect debts," she said quietly. "They collect opportunities." Wade stared at her. For the first time, he wondered if Eleanor Whitmore had not been sent to ruin Iron Creek by accident. Maybe she had been sent as the final piece of someone else's plan. And maybe she knew it. The preacher arrived the next morning on a mule that looked more stubborn than holy. His name was Reverend Silas Boone, a thin man with a sunburned face, kind eyes, and a Bible wrapped in oilcloth beneath his arm. He had married half the couples between Miles Crossing and the Yellowstone, buried the other half's parents, and knew better than to ask too many questions when a rancher requested a wedding in a hurry. By 10 o'clock, the front room of Iron Creek Ranch had been swept clean. Mrs. Hensley placed wild blue lupins in a chipped white pitcher on the table. 2 ranch hands stood awkwardly near the door in their washed shirts, trying to look solemn and failing at it. Outside, the morning wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying the smell of dust, horses, and fresh bread. Eleanor came down the stairs in the same brown traveling dress. Mrs. Hensley had offered her a better one from an old trunk, but Eleanor had gently refused. "I would rather begin as I arrived," she said. Wade stood by the hearth in his black coat, the one he wore only to funerals and cattle auctions where bankers were present. He looked at her once, then looked away, as if staring too long might make the moment feel more real than he was ready for. The ceremony was short. There were no songs, no family gathered, no lace veil, no soft tears from proud parents, just a preacher's calm voice, the rustle of paper, a ring Wade had bought in Miles Crossing, and Eleanor's hand held still in his. Wade noticed how cold her fingers were. When the Reverend asked if she took Wade Harrington as her husband, Eleanor answered clearly, "I do." When he asked Wade the same, Wade felt the room tighten around him. He had given his word to debts before. He had given his word to buyers, banks, men with contracts, and men with guns on their belts. But this was different. This was not just a promise to settle an account. This was a woman standing beside him with fear hidden behind steady eyes. "I do," Wade said. The preacher closed his Bible. "Then before God and these witnesses, I name you husband and wife." No one cheered. Danny Pike shifted his boots. One of the older hands cleared his throat. Mrs. Hensley dabbed the corner of her eye with her apron, though she would have denied it if asked. Eleanor looked at Wade, waiting. For a second, neither moved. Then Wade bent and kissed her forehead. It was not romantic. It was not grand. It was careful, almost formal, but Eleanor's breath caught as if kindness had startled her more than cruelty ever could. The wedding meal was simple: chicken stew, biscuits, preserved peaches, and coffee. The men ate with the silent hunger of people who had worked since dawn. Reverend Boone spoke about the weather. Mrs. Hensley spoke about the garden. Wade said little. Eleanor listened more than she talked. But she was listening closely. When a hand mentioned that feed costs had gone up again in Miles Crossing, Eleanor's eyes flicked toward Wade. When another complained about long water hauls to the east pasture, she folded that detail away. When Danny Pike joked that ranch money leaked faster than a cracked rain barrel, Eleanor looked down at her cup. Wade saw it all. After the preacher left and the men returned to work, the house fell quiet. It was the kind of silence that comes after a door closes on a life that cannot be reopened. Eleanor stood near the front window, turning the plain gold ring on her finger. Wade remained by the table. "You asked about the ledgers," he said at last. She turned, "Yes. I will show them to you." Something changed in her face, not victory, not pride, relief maybe, or caution. "Now," she asked, "before I lose courage." That brought a faint smile from her. Wade took 3 heavy account books from the shelf and set them on the table. Dust rose from the covers. Eleanor touched the top ledger with the care of someone handling a wounded thing. "These are all of them. These are what I keep in the house. Some receipts are in the office by the barn." She opened the first book. For the next hour she did not speak much. She read columns, traced figures with one finger, checked dates, flipped pages, then went back again. From her wooden case she took a pencil, a small ruler, and a folded sheet of paper filled with neat lines she had drawn herself. Wade watched from across the table, trying not to feel judged. At last Eleanor asked, "Who buys your beef?" "Mostly Carl Voss in Helena. Sometimes army contracts if the price is worth the trouble." "Does Voss set the price?" "He offers, I accept or refuse." "How often do you refuse?" Wade shifted in his chair. "Not often." "Why?" "Because cattle standing too long keep eating." Eleanor nodded slowly. "So he knows you feel pressure to sell." "He knows every rancher feels pressure to sell." "Yes," she said, "but your books show you feel it earlier than you should." Wade frowned, meaning. She turned the ledger toward him. Her finger stopped near 3 numbers marked over different months. "You sell large groups when your feed expenses climb, but you buy supplies in small orders at high prices. That means the supplier profits from your lack of planning, and the buyer profits from your urgency. You are losing money twice before the cattle even leave your land." Wade stared at the page. He understood cattle. He understood storms, hoof rot, broken fences, market weight, breeding lines, and the look in a horse's eye before it chose whether to trust a man. but the neat trap Eleanor had drawn out of his own numbers made his stomach tighten. "How much?" he asked. She hesitated. "Say it." "If these accounts are complete, you lost nearly $4,000 last year through poor timing and supplier terms." The room seemed to tilt. $4,000. That was not waste, that was blood. Wade stood so quickly the chair scraped back. "I kept this ranch alive through drought and winter. I know what I am doing." Eleanor did not flinch, but her hand curled around the pencil. "I did not say you were foolish. You said I was being robbed." "Yes. And you think I let it happen. I think you were too busy saving the ranch with your hands to notice who was cutting at it with paper." The anger in Wade's chest had nowhere clean to go. He walked to the window and looked out at the yard, where a horse flicked its tail beside the water trough. The truth was worse because it sounded possible. Carl Voss had smiled too easily at the last sale. The supplier in Miles Crossing had insisted prices were hard on everyone. Wade had believed them because he had been tired. Behind him, Eleanor spoke more softly. "My father taught me one honest thing by being dishonest. Numbers show where trust has been abused." Wade turned slowly. The sentence had not come from a sheltered girl. It had come from someone who had watched polished men hide knives in contracts. "What did your father do to you?" he asked. Eleanor's face closed at once. "Nothing that belongs in a wedding day conversation." "That bad? That common?" The quiet answer struck harder than a confession. Wade returned to the table, slower now. His anger had not vanished, but it had shifted away from her. "Can it be fixed?" he asked. She looked down at the books again. "Yes, not all at once, but yes." "How?" "We start by finding every place the ranch is bleeding money. Then we change the terms before anyone knows we have seen the wound." "We?" Eleanor lifted her eyes. "Unless you meant to show me the books only so I could admire the handwriting." For the first time since the writer brought the letter, Wade laughed. It was a small laugh, rough from disuse, but real enough that Mrs. Hensley looked in from the kitchen with surprise. Eleanor's face softened, then quickly steadied again, as if she did not trust warmth to last. All afternoon they worked over the accounts. Wade brought receipts from the barn office. Eleanor sorted them across the table by supplier, buyer, season, and cost. She found missing records, strange fees, repeated charges, and freight costs that made no sense. Each discovery tightened Wade's face. By dusk, the table was covered in paper. Mrs. Hensley set supper down beside them, but neither ate much. Finally, Eleanor leaned back, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "This is not simple mismanagement," she said. Wade looked up. "What do you mean?" She tapped 3 different receipts with the pencil. The same handwriting appears on charges from 2 different suppliers, and this freight fee was signed by a man who also witnessed your debt papers with my father. The house grew very still. Outside, the wind pushed against the window, making the lantern flame tremble. Wade picked up the receipt. His eyes moved over the signature. Nathaniel Crow. He knew that name. Crow was a land agent who had tried twice to buy the eastern water rights from Iron Creek. Wade had refused him both times. Eleanor looked at Wade, her voice low. "My father did not send me here only to settle a marriage contract." Wade felt the old fear return, but this time it had a shape. "They want the ranch," he said. "I think they want the water first," Eleanor answered. "And if they can make you look ruined, careless, or badly managed, they may get it for almost nothing." Wade stood over the table of ledgers, receipts, and old debts, feeling the ranch he had built shift beneath him like loose ground. That night, Eleanor Whitmore Harrington had been his wife for less than 1 day. And already, She had uncovered the first thread of a plan that could destroy everything. If this moment touched your heart, stay with the story, because sometimes the person everyone calls useless is the only one who can see the truth before it is too late. By sunrise, Wade had not slept. He had sat at the kitchen table with the ledgers open before him until the lamp burned low and the house turned cold around his shoulders. Eleanor had gone upstairs near midnight only because Mrs. Hensley insisted she would be no use to anyone if she collapsed on her second day at Iron Creek. But before she left, Eleanor had taken one receipt and placed it beside the marriage letter. 2 papers, 2 different worlds, one same name. Nathaniel Crow. Wade stared at that signature until the letters seemed to crawl like black ants across the page. Crow had come to Iron Creek twice the year before, dressed in a fine dark coat, riding a horse too polished for rough country. He had smiled like a banker and spoken like a preacher, saying he represented investors who wanted water access for future development. Wade had told him no. Crow had not argued. He had only looked past Wade toward the creek and said, "A man should know when land is worth more than pride." Now that same man's hand was tied to false charges, freight costs, and papers connected to Eleanor's father. The whole thing smelled like a trap that had been set long before Eleanor ever stepped off the stage. Wade pushed back from the table and went outside. Morning lay pale across Iron Creek. The yard was damp with dew. Horses blew steam into the cool air. A rooster scratched near the woodpile. Far across the pasture, cattle moved like shadows in the thin light. Wade breathed in the smell of hay, smoke, and earth. This place was not just land to him. It was 15 years of blistered hands. It was the grave of a favorite horse beneath the cottonwoods. It was the barn roof he had rebuilt after a storm tore it open. It was every lonely winter he had survived because giving up would have made all the suffering mean nothing. And someone was trying to take it with ink. Behind him, the porch boards creaked. Eleanor stepped out wearing a plain blue work dress Mrs. Hensley had found for her. It was a little loose at the sleeves and too simple for a woman from a wealthy family, but she had tied her hair back with a dark ribbon and rolled the cuffs as if she meant to use her hands. Wade looked at the dress, then at her. "You do not have to dress like that." "I know." "Then why?" "Because men listen differently when a woman looks ready to work." He almost answered, then stopped because she was right. Eleanor came down the steps and held out a folded sheet of paper. "I made a list." Wade took it. Of what? Questions, missing records, men to speak with, places where the numbers do not match. He unfolded it and saw neat lines of writing, supplier accounts, cattle sale dates, freight companies, water rights papers, debt terms, names of witnesses. At the bottom, underlined twice, was Nathaniel Crow. Wade looked up. "You did all this last night." "I did some of it on the train." His brows drew together. "Before you saw my ledgers." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. "I knew my father would not send me unless he expected profit from it. I did not know what kind." The quiet honesty settled between them. Wade felt a strange pull inside him, part anger, part pity, part respect he did not yet know what to do with. "You came knowing there might be trouble." "Yes." "Why?" Eleanor looked toward the far grass. "Because staying would have been worse." Before Wade could ask what she meant, Danny Pike came from the barn with a saddle over one arm. He stopped when he saw Eleanor in the yard. His eyes moved from her dress to the paper in Wade's hand. "Morning, boss," he said. "Ma'am." Eleanor nodded. "Good morning, Mr. Pike." Danny looked surprised. She remembered his name. Wade folded the list and put it in his pocket. "Saddled 2 horses." Danny glanced at Eleanor. "2. My wife is riding with me." A shadow of doubt crossed Danny's face before he hit it. Not well enough. Eleanor saw it. I can ride, she said. Danny shifted the saddle. Wasn't saying you couldn't. No, Eleanor replied gently. You were only thinking it. The boy's ears went red. Wade had to turn away to hide the edge of a smile. Within the hour, they rode east toward the creek pastures. Wade gave Eleanor a steady mare named Juniper, gentle but not lazy. Eleanor mounted carefully, not like a practiced ranch woman, but not like a helpless city girl either. She held the reins too tight at first. Wade noticed. He said nothing. After half a mile, her shoulders eased. The land opened wide before them. Montana rolled in long waves of grass and sage, cut by a silver line of water where Iron Creek bent through the valley. Cottonwoods leaned over the banks. Meadowlarks sang from fence posts. Beyond the creek, the eastern pasture stretched toward low hills that turned blue in the distance. Eleanor rode quietly, watching the water. Wade pointed with his chin. That creek is why the ranch survived the drought. And why Crow wants it, she said. Likely. How many ranches depend on this water downstream? 3 small outfits, the Bell Place, the Archer brothers, and old Amos Reed. If your water rights were challenged, would they stand with you? Wade hesitated. That was a question he did not like. Maybe. Maybe means no if the pressure is hard enough. He looked at her sharply. You speak like you have seen it happen. I have. The answer was soft, but it closed a door. They reached the east fence before noon. Wade dismounted to inspect a section where several posts had weakened. Eleanor climbed down more slowly, wincing when her boots hit the ground. You all right? He asked. Yes. You are limping. I am learning. There was no self-pity in it. She brushed dust from her skirt and followed him to the fence. Wade showed her where cattle had pushed against the wire and where runoff had loosened the soil. She listened closely, asking why the fence line ran across the slope instead of along the natural ridge. Because it was cheaper when I built it, Wade said. But more expensive every time it fails. He gave her a look. She gave one back, not challenging, just waiting. He sighed, yes. They moved along the fence, marking repairs. At the creek bend, Eleanor stopped. She knelt, picked up a handful of soil near the bank and crumbled it between her fingers. What are you doing? Wade asked. Looking. At dirt. At loss. She pointed to the bank. This is washing out, slowly but enough. If you lose this bend, the water will cut farther east. In a wet year, you may lose good grazing ground. Wade crouched beside her, studying the place he had ridden past 100 times without seeing. She was right. The bank had undercut beneath the grass. A heavy flood could tear it open. You know soil too? He asked. I know what neglect looks like in many forms. He looked at her then, really looked. There was a sadness in her face that did not belong to a spoiled girl. It belonged to someone who had spent years noticing damage no one else cared to repair. Before Wade could speak, a gunshot cracked somewhere beyond the trees. Eleanor flinched hard. Wade stood at once, one hand going to the pistol at his belt, though he did not draw it. A second sound followed, not a shot this time, but shouting. Wade moved toward Juniper. Stay here. Eleanor's face tightened. No. This is not a debate. If this concerns the creek, I need to see it. Wade wanted to argue, but another shout rose from beyond the cottonwoods, and he had no time. They mounted and rode toward the noise. On the far side of the creek, they found Amos Reed, an old rancher with a white beard, standing beside a broken water gate. 2 of Wade's cattle had slipped through the opening and were trampling Reed's vegetable patch. Reed's hired boy waved a rifle in the air, more scared than dangerous. Get your beeves off my land, Harrington, Amos shouted. Wade dismounted. Lower that rifle, Ben. No one is shooting cattle over cabbage. The boy looked ashamed and dropped the barrel. Amos pointed at the broken gate. Third time this month. Your fence fails, my garden pays. Wade's face tightened. He had not known it had happened 3 times. I will pay for the damage. You always pay after, Amos snapped. I need it stopped before. Eleanor stepped forward. Mr. Reed, may I see the gate? Amos looked at her as if noticing her for the first time. Who are you? My wife, Wade said. Amos blinked. That's so. For today and every day after, Eleanor said, then walked past both men to the gate. The word struck Wade in a place he was not ready to name. Eleanor knelt near the hinge. The wood was split, but not from cattle pressure alone. One iron pin had been loosened, not broken, loosened. She touched it with her finger and looked back at Wade. This was helped along. Wade came closer. What? She lifted the hinge pin. It slid free with hardly any force. Someone wanted this gate to fail. Amos's anger faded into confusion. You saying someone broke it? I am saying someone made sure it would look weak when cattle pressed against it. Wade felt heat rise beneath his collar. A damaged gate between neighbors was trouble. Repeated damage looked like neglect. Enough complaints from neighboring ranches could make Wade appear careless with water and boundary rights. Eleanor stood, dust on her knees, the hinge pin in her hand. Mr. Reed, she said, has anyone spoken to you lately about selling water access or signing a complaint? Amos's eyes narrowed. A landman came by last week. Wade's blood went cold. Crow, he asked. Amos nodded slowly. Nathaniel Crow said Iron Creek was growing too big and careless, said men downstream might need protection. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. No one spoke for a moment. Then Eleanor turned to Wade, her face pale but steady. This is how it starts, she said. Not with one big theft, with small troubles that make honest people doubt you. Wade looked at the broken gate, the trampled garden, the old neighbor who had nearly become an enemy, and the woman everyone had called useless standing with the first clear proof in her hand. By sundown, Iron Creek Ranch no longer had only a debt problem. It had a hidden enemy. And Eleanor had just made herself dangerous to him. The broken gate changed the way everyone looked at Iron Creek. By the next morning, the ranch no longer felt like a place waking into ordinary work. It felt like a place listening for footsteps in the grass. Men spoke lower near the barn. Horses lifted their heads at sounds beyond the fence. Even Mrs. Hensley moved through the kitchen with a tighter mouth, setting biscuits on the table as if she were laying down stones against a flood. Wade rode out before sunrise with 2 hands to fix Amos Reed's gate properly. Not patch it, not quiet the complaint. Fix it in a way that would stand through storm and cattle pressure both. He brought cedar posts, new iron hinges, heavy wire, and a promise spoken in front of Reed himself. If it fails again, Wade said, you come straight to me before you listen to any man in a town coat. Amos rubbed his white beard. I was angry yesterday. You had a right to be. That wife of yours has sharp eyes. Wade glanced toward the east where Iron Creek Ranch lay behind the rise, sharper than mine in some places. Amos studied him for a long moment. Takes a strong man to say that. Wade gave a faint, tired smile. No, it takes a foolish one too long to learn it. By noon, the repaired gate stood solid. Amos shook Wade's hand, not warmly but honestly. That was enough for now. When Wade returned to the ranch, he found Eleanor in the barn office with receipts spread across the desk, and Mrs. Hensley standing guard at the door as if she expected the papers to be robbed. Eleanor's sleeves were rolled to her elbows. A smudge of pencil marked the side of her hand. Loose strands of hair had escaped near her cheek. She did not look like a bride. She looked like a woman fighting a battle with numbers. Wade stepped inside. Amos accepted the repair. Good. You were right about the hinge. I wish I had not been. So do I. Eleanor looked up then. Her eyes were tired but steady. There are more problems. Wade removed his hat slowly. How many? Enough that I need you calm before I explain. That is not a comforting beginning. No, but it is an honest one. She turned a page and pushed 3 receipts toward him. Wade leaned over the desk. The first was from a supplier in Miles Crossing for winter feed. The second was a freight charge from a hauling company in Helena. The third was a cattle sale note signed by Carl Voss. At first, Wade saw only ordinary trouble. Then Eleanor placed her finger under the dates. These 3 charges were made on the same week last November. I remember early snow. Yes, you bought feed at a high price because the snow came early. You sold a group of steers below value to cover the cost, and you paid heavy freight because the supplier claimed the roads were difficult. They were difficult. But the county road report says the Helena road was clear by then. Wade frowned. Where did you get a county road report? Mrs. Hensley keeps old newspapers to line pantry shelves. From the doorway, Mrs. Hensley lifted her chin with pride. Waste not. Eleanor continued. The supplier charged you as if the road were blocked. The freight company collected as if the haul were dangerous. Then Voss bought your steers cheap because he knew you needed cash quickly. Wade's jaw tightened. You think they worked together? I think someone told each man when to press. Nathaniel Crow. Likely, but I cannot prove that yet. Wade paced once across the small office. Dust rose beneath his boots. Why would Voss risk it? He makes money without cheating. Some men make money honestly, until dishonest money becomes easier. The sentence sat heavy in the little room. Wade thought of Voss's round face, his smooth voice, his habit of touching men on the shoulder while telling them the price was the best he could do. He had never trusted him fully, but he had needed him. Sometimes need could look too much like trust. Eleanor gathered the papers into careful piles. We cannot accuse them without proof. If we do, they will call you bitter and me meddlesome. You are my wife, that gives you standing here. In your house perhaps, not in town. Wade heard the quiet sting under her words. You think they will dismiss you. I know they will. Mrs. Hensley stepped forward, then make them dismiss the wrong thing. Eleanor turned to her. What do you mean? The older woman folded her arms. Men like Voss and Crow do not fear a woman asking questions. They fear a woman hearing answers they thought were harmless. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. Wade looked between them. I do not like where this is going. That is because you are already going there in your head, Mrs. Hensley said. Eleanor was silent a moment, then closed the ledger. There is a supplier's dinner in Miles Crossing tomorrow, is there not? Wade frowned. Monthly business supper at the hotel, cattlemen, merchants, freight men. Will Carl Voss be there? Yes. Crow. If he is still stirring trouble, probably. Then we go. Wade shook his head. No. Eleanor's face did not change. No. No, I am not putting you in a room full of men who will insult you with smiles. I have lived in rooms like that since I was old enough to sit quietly in a chair. That does not make it right. No, she said, but it makes me practiced. There was no bitterness in her voice. That made it worse. Wade looked away toward the open barn door. Outside, Danny Pike was leading a horse past the yard. The young hand glanced toward the office, curious, then quickly looked down. Everyone on the ranch knew something was coming. They just did not know whether it would save them or bury them. Eleanor stepped closer to Wade. I am not asking to fight them with pride, she said. I am asking to listen. Let them think I am harmless. Let them talk. And if they say something cruel. A faint sadness touched her mouth. Then it will not be the first time. Wade's chest tightened. He had once thought Eleanor's calm came from privilege. Now he was beginning to understand it came from practice. Not the practice of being pampered, but the practice of surviving rooms where she had been wounded without raising her voice. That night, Iron Creek prepared for town as if preparing for weather. Mrs. Hensley brushed Eleanor's brown dress clean and found a cream shawl with only one small mend near the edge. Wade polished his boots. The men tried not to stare as Eleanor crossed the yard to check the water records she had asked Danny to collect from the east shed. Danny handed them over awkwardly. "Ma'am," he said, "I owe you an apology." Eleanor looked up. "For what?" "For thinking what I thought before I knew you." A softer woman might have pretended not to understand. Eleanor did not. "Did you change your mind?" she asked. Danny nodded, some. "Then keep going." The boy smiled despite himself. "Yes, ma'am." From the porch, Wade watched the exchange and felt something move quietly inside him. Respect had come first, then worry, then a strange tenderness he did not know how to hold. The next evening, Miles Crossing glowed under lamplight. The hotel dining room smelled of roast beef, cigar smoke, coffee, and wet wool. Men gathered in small circles, talking freight prices, cattle weights, weather, and debt in voices dressed up as friendship. Wade entered with Eleanor beside him, and conversation thinned at once. Heads turned. A few men smiled too quickly. Carl Voss stood near the fireplace with a glass in hand. Heavy-set, well-dressed, and polished, he looked exactly as Wade remembered. Beside him stood Nathaniel Crow in his fine dark coat, his beard trimmed neat, his eyes calm and cold. Crow's gaze moved to Eleanor. For half a second, surprise broke through his face. Then it vanished. "Mrs. Harrington," Crow said smoothly, "Montana agrees with you faster than expected." Eleanor gave a polite nod. "Perhaps Montana is kinder than some people warned." Voss laughed. "Careful, ma'am, this country is kind only until winter." "I was told that about families too," she replied. The laugh died uncertainly. Wade kept his face still, though his hand curled at his side. Supper began. Eleanor sat beside Wade, listening while the men talked over her as if she were part of the table setting. They spoke of feed, freight, buyers, grazing rights. Voss complained of hard markets. Crow spoke of future development and the need for organized water management. That phrase made Wade's eyes sharpen. Eleanor only lowered her gaze to her plate. Later, when coffee was served, Voss turned to Wade. "I hear you had trouble with Reed's gate again." Wade set down his cup. "It is repaired." "Trouble travels faster than repairs." Crow smiled faintly. "That is why reputation matters so much in land dealings." Eleanor lifted her eyes. "Does reputation affect water claims?" The men went quiet for half a breath. Crow looked at her with gentle amusement. "In indirect ways, perhaps. These matters are rather complicated." "I am sure they are," Eleanor said. "My father always preferred complications. They hide simple intentions so nicely." A few men shifted in their chairs. Crow's smile tightened. Voss leaned back. "You have your father's wit." "No," Eleanor said, "only his education." That was when Wade knew Crow was truly watching her. Not as a useless bride. As a threat. Near the end of the supper, Eleanor excused herself and stepped toward the hallway leading to the hotel washroom. Wade made as if to rise, but she touched the back of his hand once lightly. "Stay." It was the smallest gesture, yet it carried trust. Wade stayed. Eleanor moved down the hallway, but instead of entering the washroom, she paused near a half-open office door. Inside, two voices spoke low. "Voss." "And Crow." "She has seen something," Voss muttered. "She is a woman with a pencil," Crow said. "Do not lose sleep." "You did not see her face." "I saw enough. Her father said she was difficult, not dangerous." Eleanor held her breath. Crow's voice dropped lower. "After the July inspection, Harrington will be cornered. Reed's complaint is only the beginning. 2 more neighbors are ready to sign. Once the water board doubts his management, we offer to buy the eastern rights before the bank moves on him." Voss exhaled. "And the wife?" Crow paused. "Make sure she finds a reason to leave." Eleanor stepped back too quickly. The floorboard beneath her gave a sharp creak. Inside the office, the voices stopped. The door began to open. Eleanor turned toward the hallway, but a hand caught her wrist before she could move. For one terrible second, she thought it was Crow. Then Wade's voice, low and steady, sounded beside her. "My wife was looking for me." Eleanor looked up and saw him standing there, calm as stone, though his eyes were burning. Behind them, the office door opened wide. Crow stood in the lamplight, smiling like a man who had just found a knife in the dark. If you believe one quiet act of courage can change a life, don't forget to like this story, because Eleanor's courage has just placed her directly in the path of men who want Iron Creek destroyed. For one long breath, no one moved. Eleanor stood with Wade's hand steady around her wrist, not tight enough to hurt, only firm enough to remind her she was not alone. Crow filled the office doorway with his smooth smile. Behind him, Carl Voss hovered in the lamplight, his round face pale and damp around the temples. The hallway smelled of lamp oil and old carpet. Crow's eyes moved from Eleanor to Wade. "Lost Mrs. Harrington?" he asked. Wade answered before she could. "She was looking for me." "In a hotel office hallway." "She is new to Miles Crossing." Crow's smile widened slightly. "Of course, the West can be confusing to those unused to it." Eleanor felt the insult, but she did not lower her eyes. She had learned long ago that men like Crow preferred either anger or shame. Both made a woman easier to dismiss. So she gave him neither. "It is not the West that confuses me, Mr. Crow," she said. "Only certain men in it." Voss shifted behind Crow. Wade felt it. Eleanor felt it too. Crow let out a soft laugh. "Your wife has spirit." "She has ears too," Wade said. The words landed hard in the narrow hall. Crow's smile did not vanish, but it changed. It became thinner, colder. "Then perhaps she should be careful where she places them." Wade stepped half a pace forward, not enough to start trouble, enough to promise he could finish it if forced. "My wife will stand anywhere she has a right to stand. And hotel business offices are among those places. They are when men speak of my ranch behind closed doors." Voss tried to recover himself. "Now, Harrington, nobody was speaking ill of your ranch. We were discussing regional concerns. Water matters affect all of us." Eleanor looked at him, and apparently so do broken gates. The color drained further from Voss's face. Crow's eyes sharpened. "I see." Wade turned slightly toward Eleanor. "We are leaving." Crow tipped his head. "So soon, supper is not finished." Wade looked at him with a calm that had taken years of hard weather to build. "Neither is this." He led Eleanor back into the dining room, where conversation stopped the moment they appeared. Men glanced up from coffee cups and half-cut slices of pie. Some saw Wade's face and looked away. Others looked at Eleanor and saw something they had missed before. Not a city bride. Not a burden. A woman carrying trouble she had chosen to face. Wade picked up his hat from the chair. Eleanor gathered her shawl. No explanation was given. None was needed. They walked out into the cool night with half the dining room watching and the other half pretending not to. Outside, Miles Crossing was quieter. The saloon piano played somewhere down the street. A dog barked near the livery. The moon was high enough to silver the dust on the road. Wade helped Eleanor into the buckboard, then climbed beside her. For a while he did not speak. The horses moved at a steady pace, wheels creaking over the dark road. Eleanor kept both hands folded tightly in her lap. Her wrist still felt warm where Wade had held it. At last Wade said, "Tell me every word." She did. She repeated Voss's fear, Crow's dismissal, the July inspection, the neighbors ready to sign complaints, the plan to make Iron Creek appear careless enough for the water board to doubt Wade's rights, the offer that would come once the bank and the board pressed him from both sides. When she reached Crow's final instruction, her voice tightened. "Make sure she finds a reason to leave." Wade's hands went still on the reins. The horses slowed until the buckboard nearly stopped. Eleanor looked at him. His face was turned toward the road, but the moonlight showed the hard line of his jaw. "He meant to frighten me," she said. "No," Wade answered quietly. "He meant to remove you." The words settled into the darkness between them. Eleanor looked down at her hands. "That is why my father sent me, not because he thought I could ruin you by being useless, because he thought I would be easy to push aside, a weak link." Wade's voice was low. He was wrong. She closed her fingers around the edge of her shawl. "You do not know that yet." "I know enough." "No," she said, and the word came sharper than she intended. Wade looked at her. For the first time since he had met her, Eleanor's calm cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the fear underneath to show through. "You have seen me with papers," she said. "You have seen me notice a gate hinge and read numbers. That is not the same as being brave. Bravery is not the absence of fear. My father used to say that before sending other men into risk, while he stayed behind a desk. I am not your father." She turned away, but he heard the breath she pulled in. "No," she said softly, "you are not." They rode on. After a few minutes, Wade eased the horses to a stop beside a stand of cottonwoods. The creek murmured somewhere beyond the dark grass. Crickets sang in the brush. A night wind moved the leaves like whispered prayers. "Eleanor," he said. She looked at him reluctantly. "I cannot promise they will not try to hurt you with words. I cannot promise this will be simple. I cannot promise I will always know the right thing fast enough." Her eyes searched his face. "But I can promise this," he continued. "No man at Iron Creek will treat you like something disposable. Not my hands, not my neighbors, not me." Her mouth trembled, though she fought to steady it. "That is a dangerous promise." "Most honest ones are." She looked away toward the dark outline of the hills. For a moment, Wade thought she would say nothing more. Then she whispered, "When I was 12, I drew a plan to save one of my father's mill's money. He laughed in front of his partners, said I had a mind like a clerk and a future like a chair in a parlor." Wade listened without interrupting. "When I was 17, I found an error in a shipping contract. It would have cost him a great deal. He used the correction, then told everyone his assistant had caught it." Her voice grew quieter. "By 20, I had learned to stop handing him ideas unless I could bear watching him call them someone else's. By 23, I had become inconvenient. I knew too much, spoke too plainly, and refused the men he wanted me to marry." Wade's hands tightened around the reins. "Then he sent you to me." "Yes, to settle a debt, to quiet me, to make me someone else's problem." A long silence followed. Wade had been angry at her family before. Now anger felt too small. He looked at the woman beside him, sitting in a plain dress on a rough buckboard in the middle of Montana night, and he saw all the rooms she had survived before she ever reached his ranch. No wonder she held herself like a locked door. "Eleanor," he said, "you are not my problem." She looked at him. "You may be my trouble," he added, "but that is different." A startled laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It was soft and brief, but real. Wade smiled, and for a few seconds the dark road seemed less heavy. When they reached Iron Creek near midnight, a lantern was still burning in the kitchen window. Mrs. Hensley opened the door before Wade could knock the dust from his boots. "Well," she asked. Wade helped Eleanor down. "Crow is moving in July." Mrs. Hensley's face hardened. "Then we move in June." Eleanor stepped inside and set her wooden case on the table. Her tiredness was plain now, but something else had joined it. Purpose. "We need affidavits from neighbors before Crow gets to them," she said. "Proof of repairs, proof of sabotage if we can find it, clean account copies, supplier comparisons, freight records, a map of every water crossing." Mrs. Hensley lit another lamp. "Coffee." "Yes," Wade and Eleanor answered together. They looked at each other. Mrs. Hensley pretended not to notice the small smile that passed between them. For the next 2 days, Iron Creek became more than a ranch. It became a defense. Wade sent trusted hands to ride every fence line. Eleanor created a record book for damage, repairs, dates, witnesses, and costs. Danny Pike, eager to prove himself, brought back a bent nail from the Archer boundary gate and a set of strange boot prints near the south ditch. Mrs. Hensley copied letters in her careful hand and baked enough biscuits to keep tired men standing. Eleanor rode out each morning despite sore legs and blistered fingers. She learned the shape of the land by crossing it. She spoke to the men by name. She asked questions and remembered the answers. Some still doubted her, but fewer each day. On the third afternoon, Wade found her behind the barn trying to lift a small feed sack onto a cart. She managed it, but barely. When she turned, she saw him watching. "You may laugh," she said. "I was not going to." "You wanted to." "No," he said, "I wanted to help." She looked at him, breathing hard, dust on her cheek. "I am tired of needing help." Wade stepped closer. "Everyone needs help. Men say that when they are the ones giving it." "Then help me." She frowned. "With what?" He nodded toward the far shed. "The old water maps. I know the land, but not how to present it in a way the board will respect." Eleanor studied him. He was not humoring her. He was not offering kindness like charity. He was asking because he believed she could do what he could not. Something in her face softened. "Bring me the maps," she said. By evening they sat side by side at the dining table, old maps spread beneath the lamp. Eleanor marked creeks, gates, ditches, springs, and low crossings. Wade described each place from memory. Their shoulders nearly touched as they worked. Once, when Eleanor reached for the ink, her hand brushed his. Neither pulled away quickly. Outside, the wind moved through the yard. Inside, something quiet began building between them, not from sweet words or easy dreams, but from trust earned in hard hours. Then Danny Pike burst through the door without knocking. His face was pale. "Boss," he said, breathless, "you need to come to the south pasture." Wade stood at once. "What happened?" Danny looked at Eleanor, then back at Wade. "We found one of Crow's men there. He ran, but he dropped a leather pouch." Eleanor rose slowly. "What was in it?" she asked. Danny swallowed. "3 signed complaints against Iron Creek," he said, "and one of them has Wade's name forged at the bottom." The room went silent. Wade stared at the boy. Eleanor's face went white, but her eyes turned sharp as a drawn blade. Crow was no longer only trying to steal the ranch. He was preparing to make Wade look like he had surrendered it himself. The leather pouch lay on the kitchen table like a dead snake. No one touched it at first. Danny Pike stood by the door, hat in both hands, his face still pale from the hard ride back. Mrs. Hensley had stopped with the coffee pot halfway to the stove. Wade stood over the pouch, shoulders squared, but his eyes were fixed on the paper Eleanor had just unfolded. 3 complaints. 1 forged surrender note. And all of them written neatly enough to fool a man who wanted to be fooled. Eleanor read the first complaint in silence. It accused Iron Creek Ranch of allowing cattle to cross boundary lines and damage smaller properties downstream. The second claimed Wade had failed to maintain water gates along the creek. The third said neighboring ranchers feared Wade's operation was too large and careless to hold full control over the eastern water rights. The wording was polished. Too polished. This was prepared by someone used to legal petitions, Eleanor said. Wade's voice was low. Crow. Or my father's attorneys. The room seemed to grow colder. Danny looked from Wade to Eleanor. Your father. Eleanor folded the first complaint carefully. My father is not here, Mr. Pike, but men like him do not need to stand in a room to move pieces across a board. Wade picked up the forged note. It was worse than the complaints. It claimed that Wade Harrington, being unable to manage the burdens of Iron Creek Ranch, agreed to release partial control of the eastern water rights to a holding company until debts could be settled. At the bottom sat his name. Wade Harrington. The letters were not perfect, but they were close enough to trouble an official who did not know his hand well. Wade's fingers tightened around the paper until it bent. Eleanor reached out gently. Do not wrinkle it. His eyes flashed. That is my name. I know. They put my name on a lie. I know, she said again, softer this time. That is why we must keep it clean. Wade stared at her. The anger in him was not aimed at Eleanor, but it was too large for the room. He turned away, walked to the door, and stepped out onto the porch. The night was deep across Iron Creek. The barn lantern swung in the wind. Somewhere beyond the corrals, a horse stamped and blew through its nose. Wade gripped the porch rail until his knuckles whitened. For years he had fought weather, debt, sickness, and market men who smiled while cutting prices. All of that he understood. A man could stand in front of those troubles and brace himself. But this was different. This was a quiet theft. A theft dressed up in signatures and respectable words. Behind him, the door opened. Eleanor stepped onto the porch. She did not speak at once. She stood beside him with the lamplight behind her and the night wind tugging loose strands of hair around her face. I wanted to burn it, he said. I know. You ever feel that way? Eleanor looked toward the dark yard, more often than I admit. Wade gave a bitter breath. You hide it well. I was taught that a woman's anger is used against her faster than her mistakes. He turned his head and looked at her. The words were plain, but the truth behind them was not. Eleanor had not only learned numbers in fine houses. She had learned restraint. She had learned to swallow what would have made others shout. She had learned to keep her hands still while men stole her ideas and called her difficult for noticing. Wade's anger changed shape again. It stopped burning wild. It became something steadier. What do we do? He asked. Eleanor looked at him, and for the first time the question seemed to touch her deeply. Not because she knew the answer, but because he had asked her as an equal. We gather proof before July, she said. Not suspicion. Proof. We need every neighbor to state what truly happened. We need handwriting samples. We need the county clerk to confirm no legal transfer has been filed. And we need to know which of Crow's men dropped that pouch. Danny saw him. Not his face, Danny called from inside, having moved close enough to listen. But I saw the horse. Gray gelding, black mane, white mark near the left shoulder. Wade stepped back into the house. That sounds like a horse from Voss's yard. Danny nodded. That is what I thought. Eleanor turned to Wade. Then we start there. No, Wade said. We do not storm Voss's yard. I did not say storm. You thought it. A faint, tired smile passed across her mouth, maybe a little. Mrs. Hensley set the coffee pot down with force. Good. Thinking like that keeps a person warm. For the next week, Iron Creek became a place of quiet movement. Wade rode to Amos Reed's ranch first. Eleanor went with him, carrying a clean statement written in her careful hand. Amos was waiting on his porch, hat pushed back, suspicion still present but softened by the repaired gate behind his house. Eleanor asked him to speak only what he knew. Not what you fear, she said. Not what Crow told you, only what your own eyes saw. Amos looked at her for a long while. You talk like a judge. No, she said. I talk like someone who has seen truth lose because it came unprepared. Amos signed. The Archer brothers took longer. They were proud men with a failing herd and little patience for what they called rich rancher troubles. But Eleanor did not flatter them. She asked about their water, their debts, their broken ditch, and whether Crow had offered money in exchange for their complaint. The younger Archer denied it. The older one looked away. Wade saw Eleanor notice. She did not press him in front of his brother. Instead, as they were leaving, she paused near the woodpile where the older Archer had gone to split kindling. Mr. Archer, she said quietly, desperate men are not wicked for feeling trapped, but signing a false complaint will not free you. It will only hand your trouble to a man who profits from it. The older brother's axe lowered. He said he could settle our bank note, the man muttered. Wade stood a few feet away, anger rising again, but Eleanor lifted one hand without looking at him. How much? She asked. $800. For your signature. The man's shame showed in the red around his eyes. For my silence, too. Eleanor's face softened. Then let truth pay more than silence. That evening, both Archer brothers signed statements. The older one also wrote that Nathaniel Crow had offered financial relief in exchange for support against Iron Creek. It was the first real crack in Crow's wall. If this part of the story makes you wonder how many quiet people carry truth no one has asked for, stay with Eleanor and Wade a little longer, because the next turn will test not only their ranch, but the trust growing between them. By the end of the week, Eleanor had gathered 5 statements, 2 handwriting samples, a copy of Wade's true signature from the county clerk, and proof that no legal water transfer existed. But every answer led to a greater danger. Crow had moved faster than they expected. On Saturday afternoon, Wade and Eleanor returned from the Bell place to find Mrs. Hensley waiting in the yard with a telegram in her hand. Her face was pale in a way Wade had rarely seen. It came from Helena, she said. Wade took it. Eleanor watched his eyes move over the words. What is it? She asked. He did not answer at first. Then he handed it to her. The telegram was brief. Water Rights Review advanced. Hearing set for June 23rd. Petition filed by concerned parties. Attendance required. Failure to appear may result in provisional transfer. Eleanor read it twice. June 23rd was 4 days away. They moved the hearing, she said. Wade's face was hard. Crow knew we were gathering proof. Mrs. Hensley's voice trembled with anger. Can they do that? With the right pressure, Eleanor said, yes. Wade turned toward the barn. Then we ride to Helena. Not yet, Eleanor said. He stopped, not yet. We need one more thing. What? She looked down at the forged note, then toward the road leading out of Iron Creek. The man who carried these papers, she said. If we can prove who he works for, Crow cannot call them misunderstandings. Wade shook his head. We do not have time. We do if he comes back. Danny, standing near the stable, looked uneasy. Why would he? Eleanor folded the telegram slowly. Because Crow still needs to make me leave, she said. The words hung in the dusty yard. That night, Wade placed 2 men near the south pasture and 1 near the east road. He told Mrs. Hensley to keep the house locked and the lamps low. Eleanor said nothing as preparations were made, but Wade saw her hand shake slightly when she tucked the evidence into her wooden case. After supper, he found her in the front room, sitting beside the cold fireplace. You should sleep, he said. So should you. That was not an answer. It was the only fair one. He sat across from her. For a while, they listened to the old house settle. Then Eleanor spoke. If something happens before Helena, promise me you will still go. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means Iron Creek cannot depend on one person. It will not depend on only me either. Wade. The way she said his name stopped him. It was the first time she had spoken it without formality. No Mr. Harrington, no careful distance, just Wade. He leaned forward. You listen to me, he said. They sent you here because they thought you had nowhere to belong. They thought if trouble came, you would run. But this is your home now if you want it. And I am not riding to Helena without you unless I am forced by God himself. Her eyes shone, but she blinked the tears back before they fell. I'm afraid, she whispered. I know. I hate that. I know that too. He held out his hand across the small space between them. After a moment, she placed hers in it. They sat that way in the dim room, not as strangers bound by debt, not yet as lovers brave enough to name it, but as 2 people standing on the same side of a storm. Near midnight, a horse cried out from the south pasture. Then came Danny's shout. Wade was on his feet at once. A lantern flared outside. Boots pounded across the porch. Mrs. Hensley called from the kitchen. Eleanor grabbed her wooden case and followed Wade into the yard despite his sharp warning to stay back. Beyond the barn, 2 riders were cutting across the dark field. One of Wade's hands chased them from the fence line, firing a warning shot into the sky. The riders split. One vanished toward the creek. The other veered too close to the corral, where his horse stumbled hard in a rut. The rider fell. Wade reached him first. By the time Eleanor arrived, breathless and pale, Danny had the man pinned against the ground. The rider's hat had fallen off, and bloodless fear covered his face. Wade held a lantern over him. Eleanor knew him at once. He was the clerk from Miles Crossing Hotel, the nervous man who had sat near Voss during the supper. Wade's voice was quiet and dangerous. Who sent you? The clerk shook his head. I cannot say. Eleanor stepped forward. In the lantern light, her face looked calm, but her eyes were full of fire. You carried forged papers, she said. You trespassed on this ranch, and tonight you came back because someone told you to frighten me. The clerk's mouth trembled. She knelt slowly, bringing her eyes level with his. Tell the truth now, she said, or tell it in Helena with every man there watching you shake. The clerk broke. Crow, he whispered. Nathaniel Crow sent me. Wade closed his eyes for half a second. Eleanor stood, her hand pressed over her heart as if holding herself steady. They had the proof. But before anyone could speak, the clerk looked at her with fresh terror. He said if you made it to the hearing, Mrs. Harrington, he would show everyone the letter your father sent. Eleanor went still. Wade turned to her. What letter? The clerk swallowed. The one that says she was sent west because no decent family in Virginia City would keep her anymore. The lantern flame shook in the wind. Eleanor's face went white. And Wade understood with a cold weight in his chest that Crow had one last weapon. Not against the ranch. Against her heart. The name of Eleanor's father passed through the yard without being spoken. Everyone knew whose letter the clerk meant. Colonel Augustus Whitmore had reached across miles of mountain, prairie, and dust, and somehow his hand still found his daughter's throat. Eleanor stood in the lantern light with the wooden case clutched against her chest. The wind pulled at her shawl, but she did not seem to feel it. Wade looked at her, waiting for anger, denial, or explanation. None came. Only silence. The clerk remained on the ground, his breath shaking. Danny Pike kept one hand on the man's shoulder, though there was no need now. Fear had done what rope could not. It had tied the clerk in place. Wade looked down at him. Where is this letter? The clerk swallowed. Crow has it. Where? I do not know. His office maybe, or with the hearing papers. I swear I do not know. Wade's eyes hardened. What does it say? The clerk looked at Eleanor, then away. Only what I heard, that Miss Whitmore was troublesome, that she was unfit for polite company, that she had embarrassed her family by interfering in business matters, that she was sent to fulfill the marriage bargain because no proper household could endure her opinions. A quiet sound came from Mrs. Hensley on the porch. Not a cry, something sharper, like a woman trying not to curse in front of heaven. Eleanor's face did not change, but the hand holding the case trembled. Wade took one step toward the clerk. Did Crow tell you to use that against her? Yes. At the hearing. The clerk nodded. If she spoke. The words hit Wade like a fist. If she spoke. Not if he did. Not if Iron Creek defended itself. If Eleanor dared to raise her voice in a room of men, Crow meant to open a letter written by her own father and turn every insult into proof against her. Wade turned to her. Eleanor. She looked at him then, but her eyes were far away. I need to go inside, she said. Her voice was steady enough to frighten him. Wade nodded once to Danny. Lock him in the grain shed. Keep 2 men on him till morning. No rough handling. Danny pulled the clerk to his feet. Yes, boss. The yard began moving again, but Eleanor did not wait for any of it. She crossed the porch, walked into the house, and went straight to the front room. Wade followed, but stopped at the doorway. She set the wooden case on the table with care, too much care. Then she placed both hands flat beside it and lowered her head. For several seconds, the only sound was the ticking clock and the wind pushing at the window frame. Wade stepped inside. Tell me what is in the letter. Eleanor gave a small laugh with no joy in it. Truth twisted until it becomes a weapon. Tell me. She looked up. My father wanted me to marry a man named Henry Barlow. He was older, wealthy, and cruel in that polished way people excuse if a man owns enough property. I refused. Wade said nothing. He tried to force the engagement anyway. At a dinner in front of guests, he announced it as if my silence had already been purchased. I corrected him, calmly, publicly. A faint flush rose in her face, not shame but memory. He never forgave me. Wade's jaw tightened. Eleanor opened the wooden case. Inside were papers tied with ribbon, a small pencil box, folded notes, and a worn little book with a cracked leather cover. She touched the book but did not lift it. After that night, everything I did became proof that I was difficult. If I read contracts, I was interfering. If I questioned costs, I was arrogant. If I refused a man, I was ungrateful. My father began keeping letters, records of my disobedience, he called them. Disobedience, Wade repeated, the word bitter in his mouth. Yes, a daughter with a mind of her own is often called by uglier names first. She lifted one folded paper from the case and handed it to him. Wade hesitated before taking it. What is this? A copy of a letter I was never meant to see. He unfolded it. The handwriting was formal and sharp. Wade read only a few lines before his chest filled with heat. Whitmore had written of Eleanor as though she were damaged goods to be transferred quietly. He called her stubborn, unfeminine, troublesome, unsuited for proper society, and too proud for her own good. He suggested that life on a remote ranch might discipline what comfort had failed to correct. Wade lowered the paper before he finished. I cannot read more. I did, Eleanor said. When? The night before I left. Wade looked at her. You knew. I found the copy in his study. He must have sent another to Crow, perhaps more than one. Why did you still come? Eleanor closed the case halfway, then stopped with her fingers resting on the lid. Because for the first time in my life, being sent away felt like a door instead of a sentence. The answer broke something quiet in Wade. He had thought she came out of duty, fear, pride, maybe desperation. But now he understood something deeper. Eleanor had stepped onto that stage not because she believed Iron Creek would save her, but because even danger looked better than a house where her spirit was slowly being buried. He sat across from her. I am sorry. She gave him a tired look. You did not write it. No, but I believed parts of it before I met you. Her eyes searched his face. Wade did not look away. I expected a useless bride. I expected trouble. I expected you to fail. And now I expect most men to regret underestimating you. Her mouth trembled once, and she turned her face toward the window. Outside, a lantern moved near the grain shed where the clerk was being watched. Iron Creek was still in danger. Crow was still moving. The hearing was only days away. But inside that small front room, another fight was taking place. Eleanor against the voice of her father. Wade against the judgment he had carried into the marriage. And something fragile between them against the fear that truth could be used to destroy it. The next morning, Eleanor did not come down for breakfast. Mrs. Hensley set coffee on the table and looked at Wade with open concern. She needs time. We do not have much. Time for the hearing, no. Time for the heart, yes. Wade looked toward the staircase. I do not know how to help her. Mrs. Hensley poured coffee into his cup. Start by not treating her like glass. Glass breaks when handled wrong. She is more like iron, but even iron gets tired in the forge. Wade carried a tray upstairs himself. He paused outside Eleanor's room and knocked. No answer came. Eleanor, he said, I brought coffee. Still nothing. He waited, then turned to leave. The door opened. Eleanor stood there in yesterday's dress, eyes reddened but dry. Her hair was braided loosely over one shoulder. She looked smaller in the doorway, not weak, just worn down from holding herself upright too long. Wade held out the tray. She looked at it, then at him. I cannot be the reason you lose the ranch. You are not. If I speak at that hearing, Crow will use the letter. Let him. Her eyes widened. You do not understand. I understand that he has paper. We have proof. Men believe paper when it comes from fathers, colonels, bankers, and men with clean cuffs. Then we make them believe their own eyes. How? Wade set the tray on the hall table. Ride with me. Where? To the men who signed for us. To the hands who watched you work. To Amos Reed, the archers, the Bell Place. If Crow brings one letter calling you useless, we bring a dozen voices proving otherwise. Eleanor shook her head. That sounds too simple. Truth often does. That is why liars dress theirs up. For the first time that morning, something like light entered her face. They spent the day gathering more than statements. They gathered witness. Amos Reed wrote that Eleanor found the tampered gate pin when no one else had seen it. The Archer brothers wrote that she uncovered Crow's offer without threats. Danny Pike wrote that she had organized repair records, water maps, and evidence after only days on the ranch. Mrs. Hensley wrote the longest statement of all, in careful, fierce letters, saying that Eleanor had arrived with one bag, a tired body, and a will stronger than any pride she had ever seen. By late afternoon, they rode to the small Bell place downstream. Martha Bell, a widowed ranch woman with 2 sons and more backbone than money, welcomed Eleanor with coffee on the porch. She had already signed a water statement, but Wade asked if she would add what she had seen. Martha looked at Eleanor. "Do you want the truth, child, or the kind men will respect?" Eleanor's lips curved faintly. "Are they different?" "Too often." "Then write the truth anyway." Martha smiled. "Good answer." She wrote that men had called Eleanor a burden before she ever stepped on Montana soil, but that in 1 week, the young woman had done more to protect honest water rights than half the comfortable men in Miles Crossing. When Martha finished, she folded the paper and placed it in Eleanor's hand. "Do not let your father's letter be the loudest thing in that room," she said. Eleanor held the paper close. On the ride home, the sun dipped low over the grass, turning the land gold. Wade and Eleanor rode side by side in quiet. After a while she said, "Why are you doing this?" Wade looked at her. "Saving my ranch." "No, standing beside me when it would be easier to say I am only a business arrangement." He slowed his horse slightly. "Because that stopped being true before I knew how to say it." Eleanor looked down at her reins. The wind moved across the open country, lifting dust around their horses' legs. Wade continued, voice rougher now. "I do not know what we are yet. I know we were forced together by debts and men who thought they owned the right to decide our lives. But when I look at Iron Creek now, I do not just see what I built. I see what we might save, what we might become." Eleanor's hand tightened on the reins. "You should be careful, Wade Harrington," she said softly. "Words like that can make a woman hope." He looked at her, and this time he did not hide the warmth in his eyes. "Then I hope she does." For a moment neither spoke. It was not a confession, not yet. But it was the nearest thing either of them had dared to place in the open. That night back at Iron Creek, they spread every statement, map, receipt, and copy across the dining table. Eleanor arranged them in order for the hearing. Wade watched her work with calm focus, but now he saw the cost beneath it. Every paper she placed down was not only defense for the ranch, it was defense of herself. Near midnight, she reached into her wooden case and took out the little cracked leather book. Wade looked at it. "What is that?" "My own record," she said. "Of what?" She opened the first page. "Everything my father told me I was wrong to notice." Inside were years of copied figures, business errors, shipping patterns, mill accounts, cost-saving ideas, and notes written in a young girl's careful hand. Proof that Eleanor had not suddenly become useful in Montana. She had always been brilliant. They had simply refused to see it. Wade turned the pages slowly, awe and anger moving together inside him. "This goes to Helena," he said. Eleanor's hand covered the page. "No." "Why not?" "Because it is mine." He looked at her then, understanding before she explained. The book was not just evidence. It was the one place her mind had belonged to her when every other room tried to take it away. Wade closed the cover gently. "Then it stays yours," he said. Her eyes softened. Before either could say more, hoofbeats sounded outside. Not fast like trouble. Slow. Heavy. Confident. Wade stood and moved to the window. A carriage had stopped in the yard. A fine black carriage that did not belong anywhere near Iron Creek at that hour. The door opened. A tall older man stepped down in a dark traveling coat, silver hair neat, cane in hand, his face proud and cold even under Montana dust. Eleanor rose from the table, all color leaving her cheeks. Wade knew before she spoke. Her father had come. Colonel Augustus Whitmore stood in the yard of Iron Creek Ranch, looking at the house as if he had already bought it. Tell me in the comments, would you have faced that hearing after your own father came to break your courage? Because Eleanor's greatest test is no longer only against Crow. It is standing outside her door. For a moment, Iron Creek Ranch seemed to forget how to breathe. The black carriage stood in the yard with its polished sides dulled by Montana dust. Two tired horses tossed their heads beneath silver-trimmed harness. A driver sat stiffly on the front bench, looking anywhere except at the house, as if even he knew he had brought trouble to the door. Colonel Augustus Whitmore planted his cane in the dirt and looked around with cold displeasure. His eyes moved over the barn, the corrals, the lantern-lit porch, the line of saddles near the rail, and the wide, dark land beyond the fences. He did not look impressed. He looked offended that such a place existed without asking permission from men like him. Eleanor stood inside the front room, one hand pressed against the table. The papers before her trembled under her fingers. Wade watched her face. Every bit of courage she had gathered in the last days seemed to pull inward at the sight of that man, not disappear, not break, but turn silent like a child hiding behind a locked door. Wade stepped closer. You do not have to face him alone. Her eyes stayed on the window. I know. But her voice sounded like she was trying to convince herself. Mrs. Hensley came from the kitchen, wiping her hands slowly on her apron. She took one look outside and her face hardened. So that is the father. Eleanor nodded. Mrs. Hensley's mouth tightened. I have seen warmer faces on tax notices. Under any other moon, the remark might have made Eleanor smile. Tonight, she only closed her wooden case and gathered the hearing papers into a neat stack. Wade noticed, leave those. No, he will try to touch what frightens him. Then he can frighten himself empty-handed. Before Eleanor could answer, the cane struck the porch steps. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a knock came at the door, sharp and proud. Wade opened it. Colonel Whitmore stood straight despite the long travel, silver hair combed neatly beneath his hat, dark coat brushed clean, gloves still on. He looked at Wade the way a buyer might look at a horse he suspected had hidden flaws. Mr. Harrington, he said. Colonel Whitmore. No hand was offered. None was taken. Whitmore's gaze slid past Wade and found Eleanor in the room behind him. My daughter, he said, you have made yourself difficult to reach. Eleanor lifted her chin. I was not aware you were trying. I sent letters. To whom? A small pause. To Mr. Crow, who has been assisting with legal matters in the territory. Wade's eyes darkened. Crow does not speak for this house. Whitmore looked back at him. No, but he appears to understand business better than most men in this house. Mrs. Hensley made a low sound in her throat, but Eleanor touched her arm gently before stepping forward. Why are you here, father? Whitmore stepped inside without invitation. His boots struck the floorboards with measured control. The house seemed to shrink around him, though he was not a large man. Some people carried rooms with them, cold rooms, rooms where every chair faced judgment. I came to prevent embarrassment, he said. Eleanor's hands folded before her. Whose? His jaw tightened. Do not begin this way. This is the only way I know how to begin, when someone arrives after midnight with no kindness in his face. Wade looked at her then. The fear was still there. He could see it in the stillness of her shoulders, but her voice had not bowed. Whitmore removed his glove slowly. "You have involved yourself in matters beyond your standing. Mr. Crow has informed me that you are interfering with a water review, encouraging local men to challenge valid concerns, and placing your husband in greater danger through reckless pride." "My husband was in danger before I arrived." "Your husband," Whitmore said, with a faint look toward Wade, "is a rancher, not a strategist. He needed settlement, not provocation." Wade's voice was quiet, careful. Whitmore ignored him. "Eleanor, you will return with me tonight. I have arranged lodging in Miles Crossing. From there, we will go east." The words landed like a door slamming. Eleanor did not move. Wade stepped fully into the room. "She is my wife." Whitmore's eyes flicked to him. "A technical condition arranged by debt. A lawful marriage. A forced match between a desperate rancher and a troublesome daughter." Wade took one step forward, but Eleanor lifted a hand. Not to protect her father. To stop Wade from carrying a fight that was hers to face. She looked at Whitmore. "You sent me here." "Yes, and I now see the mistake." "The mistake was not sending me. The mistake was thinking I would stay what you called me." Whitmore's nostrils flared. "Do not mistake a few days of ranch disorder for accomplishment." Eleanor's fingers tightened, but her voice held. "I found false charges in Iron Creek's accounts. I found a forged surrender note. I found Crow's clerk trespassing with prepared complaints. I found proof that he offered money for false statements. Tomorrow, those papers go to Helena." A flicker passed through Whitmore's face. Small. Quick. But Wade saw it. So did Eleanor. "You knew," she whispered. Whitmore's expression recovered at once. "I knew Mr. Crow had concerns." "No," Eleanor said. "You knew he meant to take the water." Whitmore's silence was the answer. Mrs. Hensley stepped forward. "Lord forgive me, I am old enough to know better, but I would dearly like to throw this man off the porch." Whitmore looked at her, as if she were furniture that had spoken out of turn. Eleanor moved between them. "Why?" she asked her father. "Why would you help him?" Whitmore's mouth hardened. "Because the Harrington debt gave us leverage, and leverage unused is wasted. Western water rights are becoming valuable. Crow saw what others were too slow to see. Had you done as expected, this would have resolved quietly." "Done as expected," Eleanor repeated. "Accepted your place." "My place is what? A wife who says nothing while thieves use her marriage as a doorway. As a woman with enough sense not to ruin herself in public." There it was. The old sentence wearing new clothes. Eleanor lowered her eyes for one breath. Wade saw the wound strike, not because the words were new, but because they were familiar. They carried the dust of years. Then she looked up. "My place is beside the truth." Whitmore's face tightened with anger. "You speak as if truth will protect you. It will not. Tomorrow, Crow will present my letter. Every man in that room will know your own father judged you unfit, unstable, and impossible to manage. You think they will listen to your papers after that?" Wade's hands curled. Eleanor went pale, but she did not step back. Whitmore lowered his voice, and somehow that made it crueler. "Come with me now, and I will say you were overwrought. I will say the climate unsettled you. I will preserve what remains of your name." "My name," Eleanor said, "has survived your keeping long enough." For the first time, Whitmore looked truly angry. "You ungrateful girl." Wade moved so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "Do not call her that in my house." Whitmore turned on him. "Your house. This ranch stands because my money rescued it." Wade's voice dropped. "This ranch stands because I worked when money ran out. And now it may fall because you let a woman with old grievances steer you into humiliation." Wade looked at Eleanor. He could see pain in her face, but also something else now, something awake. He reached for the stack of papers and placed them in her hands. "No," he said. "If Iron Creek falls, it will not be because I listened to my wife. Listening to her is the first wise thing I have done in years." Eleanor stared at him. Whitmore's mouth twisted. Sentiment dangerous in business. "Maybe," Wade said, "but useful in a marriage." The room went still. Eleanor looked down at the papers. Her fingers steadied around them. Whitmore saw it too. He had come to find the daughter he could still bend with shame. Instead, he found a woman whose husband had just handed her the proof and stood aside so she could hold it. That frightened him more than Wade's anger. "Very well," Whitmore said coldly. "Destroy yourself tomorrow, but understand this, Eleanor. When that room laughs at you, when every man sees you as I have always seen you, do not look to me for rescue." Eleanor took a breath. Then she walked to the door and opened it. The night air came in cool and clean. "I stopped looking to you for rescue years ago," she said. For 1 second, Colonel Whitmore looked older. Then pride closed over his face like a shutter. He put on his gloves, stepped past Wade, and walked out to the porch. His cane struck the wood harder now. At the carriage, he turned back. "Crow will be ready." Eleanor stood in the doorway. "So will I." The carriage rolled away into darkness. No one spoke until the sound of wheels faded. Then Eleanor's strength left her all at once. She sat down hard in the nearest chair, still holding the papers. Wade knelt in front of her but did not touch her until she looked at him. "He knew," she whispered. "All this time he knew." "Yes. He did not send me because he thought I was useless." Wade shook his head. "He sent me because he thought I could be used." Her eyes filled, and this time she could not blink the tears back. Wade gently took the papers before they slipped from her hands. Then he held out his own hand, palm open. Eleanor looked at it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. "I am so tired of proving I am not what he says," she said. Wade's thumb moved once over her knuckles. "Then tomorrow, do not prove anything to him." She looked at him. "Prove what is true," Wade said. "That is enough." The next morning broke clear and bright. By dawn, Iron Creek Ranch was ready. Wade wore his black coat. Eleanor wore the same brown dress she had arrived in, but Mrs. Hensley pinned the cream shawl at her shoulder with a small silver brooch shaped like a leaf. "For steady nerves," Mrs. Hensley said. Eleanor touched the brooch. "Is it lucky?" "No," the older woman replied. "It is mine. That makes it stubborn." Danny Pike brought the horses around. Amos Reed arrived just after sunrise, riding beside the Archer brothers and Martha Bell. One by one, the neighbors gathered in the yard, men and women who had seen enough truth to stand behind it. Eleanor looked at them, stunned. Martha Bell smiled from her saddle. "Did you think you were riding to Helena alone?" Wade helped Eleanor mount Juniper. The ride to Helena took hours. Dust rose behind the small group like a banner. No one sang. No one joked. But there was strength in the sound of so many horses moving in one direction. By afternoon, the water board hearing room was full. Men in coats sat along the walls. Ranchers stood near the back. A clerk arranged documents at a long table. Carl Voss avoided Wade's eyes. Nathaniel Crow stood near the front, calm and polished, speaking quietly with 2 board members. Then Crow saw Eleanor. His smile returned. Beside him on the table lay a sealed letter. Wade recognized the red wax. Eleanor did too. Crow touched the letter with 2 fingers, almost tenderly, as if it were a weapon he had sharpened all morning. The chairman called the hearing to order. Wade felt Eleanor's hand brush his sleeve once. A quiet touch. A steadying breath. Then Crow rose. "Gentlemen," he began, Before we discuss Iron Creek's failures, I believe we must address the reliability of the person attempting to defend it. His eyes turned toward Eleanor. The room shifted. Eleanor stood slowly. Her face was pale, but her voice, when it came, was clear. "Then start with me, Mr. Crow." And every man in that room turned to hear the woman they had been told was useless. The hearing room fell so quiet that Eleanor could hear the scratch of the clerk's pen stop on the page. Nathaniel Crow stood near the front table with Colonel Whitmore's sealed letter beneath his fingers. He had expected her to shrink from it. He had expected Wade to defend her. He had expected the room to see a frightened young bride hiding behind a rancher's coat. Instead, Eleanor stood on her own. Her brown dress was plain. Her cream shawl was travel-worn. The small silver leaf brooch at her shoulder caught the window light like a stubborn little flame. Her hands trembled, but only slightly, and she placed them against the table before anyone could see. Crow smiled. "As you wish, Mrs. Harrington." He lifted the letter. "This document comes from Colonel Augustus Whitmore, a respected businessman and father of the young woman now attempting to involve herself in serious territorial matters. I believe it speaks to her character." Wade took half a step forward. Eleanor did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Crow. "Read it," she said. A low murmur moved through the room. Crow paused. For the first time, his confidence flickered. A weapon loses some power when the person it is aimed at stops running from it. Still, he broke the seal. Colonel Whitmore sat near the side wall, cold and upright, his cane across his knees. His face revealed nothing, but his fingers tightened around the cane handle. Crow unfolded the paper and began. He read of Eleanor's difficult nature. He read that she was unsuited to proper domestic peace. He read that she had interfered in matters beyond her station. He read that her opinions had caused embarrassment, that her judgment was not reliable, and that her marriage to Wade Harrington had been arranged partly in the hope that frontier life might correct her stubborn spirit. Some men looked uncomfortable. Some looked at the floor. A few watched Eleanor with curiosity, as if waiting to see whether she would break. She did not. When Crow finished, he folded the letter with slow care. "There," he said. "I believe the board can now see the nature of the person urging these accusations against honest businessmen." Eleanor looked at the chairman. He was an older man named Mr. Halbert, with heavy brows and tired eyes. He had presided over land quarrels, water fights, grazing disputes, and more lies than he cared to remember. "May I answer?" Eleanor asked. Halbert leaned back. "You may." Eleanor turned toward the room. "My father's letter is not false in every part," she said. That stirred the crowd. Wade looked at her, surprised. Eleanor's voice remained clear. "I did interfere in his business. I did question contracts. I did embarrass him at dinners. I did refuse the future he chose for me, and I was difficult." Crow's smile returned slightly. Then Eleanor looked directly at him. "But difficult is not the same as dishonest, and obedient is not the same as good." The smile left his face. Eleanor reached for the stack of papers Wade had placed before her. She lifted the first one. "This is a copy of Iron Creek's freight charge from last November. This is a county road notice from the same week. The charge claims blocked roads. The notice shows the road was open." She placed both papers before the board. "This is a supplier's invoice with a false increase. This is the matching ledger entry from the supplier's own hand, given to us by his assistant after he learned the matter would come before this board." A man at the back whispered. Carl Voss shifted in his chair. Eleanor lifted another sheet. "These are cattle sale records showing Mr. Voss purchased Iron Creek stock below value within 2 days of each unusual feed charge. Once may be luck. 3 times is a pattern. Voss stood abruptly. This is insult. Mr. Halbert struck the table once. Sit down. Voss said. Eleanor did not rush. She did not plead. She built the truth piece by piece, the way a rancher repairs a fence after a storm, one post at a time, one rail at a time, strong enough that pressure only proves the work. She brought forward Amos Reed. The old rancher removed his hat and told the board how Crow had warned him against Wade, how his gate had been tampered with, and how Eleanor had found the loosened hinge pin. She brought forward the Archer brothers. The older one could barely meet the room's eyes, but he spoke. He told them Crow had offered to settle his bank note in exchange for a complaint against Iron Creek. She brought forward Danny Pike. The young hand stood stiff as a rail and told how he found the dropped leather pouch, the forged surrender note, and the complaints before they were filed. Then the clerk from Miles Crossing was brought in under guard. His face was gray with fear. Crow finally lost his smile. The clerk spoke quietly at first, then louder when Mr. Halbert ordered him to be clear. He admitted Crow had sent him to carry the forged papers. He admitted he returned to Iron Creek to frighten Eleanor into leaving before the hearing. He admitted the gray gelding came from Voss's yard. The room had changed now. Men who had leaned back with judgment now leaned forward with attention. Colonel Whitmore's face remained cold, but his eyes had gone dark. Crow rose. This clerk is frightened and unreliable. He will say whatever saves his own hide. Eleanor turned to him. Then perhaps your own words will help him. She lifted a final paper. Crow went still. Wade looked at it, then at her. He had not seen that page before. Eleanor glanced toward Mrs. Hensley, who sat near the back with her hands folded tight. Mrs. Hensley gave the smallest nod. Eleanor faced the board. Last night, after Colonel Whitmore came to Iron Creek, Mrs. Hensley found this tucked beneath the carriage step after it left. It appears to have fallen from a leather dispatch folder. She placed it on the table. It is a memorandum from Nathaniel Crow to Colonel Whitmore. It outlines a proposed purchase of Iron Creek's eastern water rights after a provisional transfer. It names Carl Voss as a cooperating buyer. It also states that I was to be removed from the ranch before I could examine accounts. A sound moved through the room, low and shocked. Crow's face drained of color. Colonel Whitmore stood. That document is private correspondence. Mr. Halbert looked at him. Private does not mean harmless, Colonel. Eleanor turned toward her father. For a moment, the room faded from her. She saw only the man who had taught her to doubt her own voice, the man who had called her difficult because she noticed what others hid, the man who had sent her west as if she were a problem to be traded. Her voice softened but carried. You were right about one thing, Father. I was never fit for the life you wanted for me. Whitmore's jaw clenched. Eleanor continued. I was not fit to sit quietly while men made dishonest money. I was not fit to smile at insults. I was not fit to marry a cruel man for comfort. And I was not fit to be used as a key to steal my husband's ranch. She looked at Wade then. His eyes were steady on hers. Not rescuing her. Believing her. That gave her the strength to finish. I am fit for this, she said. For truth, for work, for land that answers to honest hands, for a home where a woman's mind is not treated like a shameful thing. Silence followed. Then Martha Bell, sitting near the back, whispered, Amen. A few men lowered their heads. Mr. Halbert gathered the papers and spoke with the 2 other board members. The room waited. Crow stood stiffly, but his hands shook. Voss wiped sweat from his neck. Colonel Whitmore stared at his daughter like he was seeing a stranger and a mistake at the same time. At last, Mr. Halbert faced the room. The provisional transfer is denied. Iron Creek's water rights remain with Wade Harrington and his lawful household. The board will forward evidence of forgery, bribery, and attempted fraud to the territorial authorities. Mr. Crow, Mr. Voss, you will remain available for questioning. Crow started to protest, but no one listened. That was the first real justice Eleanor had ever seen. Not loud. Not bloody. Not cruel. Just truth finally standing in the open, with enough witnesses beside it. Wade closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them, the hardness that had lived in his face for weeks was gone. He turned to Eleanor, but before he could speak, Colonel Whitmore approached. The room watched. Eleanor held still. Her father stopped in front of her. For once, he had no letter to hide behind. "You have made a public enemy of me," he said. Eleanor's face was calm. "No, father, you did that yourself." His eyes moved over her, searching for the daughter he could still command. He did not find her. "You will regret this." Wade stepped beside Eleanor, but she answered first. "I have regretted silence more." Colonel Whitmore looked at Wade. "You think you have won something valuable." Wade took Eleanor's hand in his, openly, before the whole room. "I know I have." Whitmore's face tightened. Then he turned and walked out without another word. His cane struck the floor, sharp and lonely, until the sound faded down the hall. Eleanor watched him go. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she did not wipe it away. Wade leaned closer. "Are you all right?" "No," she said softly, "but I will be." He nodded. "That is honest enough." The ride back to Iron Creek began near sunset. The sky spread wide over Montana, washed in gold and rose. The neighbors rode with them for the first few miles before turning toward their own homes. Amos Reed tipped his hat. The Archer brothers promised to send help for the next fence repair. Martha Bell rode close to Eleanor before taking the south road. "You spoke well, child," Martha said. Eleanor smiled through her weariness. "I was scared." Martha laughed gently. "Most brave people are, the rest are just loud." By the time Wade and Eleanor reached Iron Creek, the first stars were showing. The ranch house glowed with lamplight. The barn stood solid. Cattle moved quietly beyond the fence. The creek, the same creek men had tried to steal with lies, shone silver beneath the evening sky. Eleanor dismounted slowly. Her legs ached from the long day, and the weight of it all settled into her bones. Wade came around Juniper and offered his hand. She took it. For a moment, they stood in the yard where she had first arrived, a stranger with one bag and 30 days to prove herself. Only now, she no longer wanted 30 days. She wanted years. Mrs. Hensley opened the door before they reached the porch. Her eyes went from Wade's face to Eleanor's. "Well?" she asked. Wade looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at the house, the barn, the dusty yard, the lantern in the window, and the man beside her. "Iron Creek is safe," she said. Mrs. Hensley pressed one hand to her heart. "Thank the Lord." Wade smiled faintly, and Mrs. Harrington made Crow look smaller than a fence nail. Eleanor gave him a tired look. "That is not official testimony." "It should be." Mrs. Hensley laughed, and that laugh seemed to loosen the whole house. Weeks passed. Crow left Montana under investigation, his polished name stained by the very papers he once trusted to trap others. Carl Voss lost more than business. He lost the quiet respect that had kept men selling to him. Colonel Whitmore returned east, where money could still buy silence, but not from the daughter he had failed to break. Iron Creek changed too. Not all at once, not like a miracle, real things never do. Eleanor began with the accounts. She changed supplier terms, planned purchases by season, and made every cost visible. Wade changed the east fences, shifted water access, and repaired the creek banks the way she had suggested. Together, They built a system stronger than pride alone could have made. At first, some ranchers came only to watch her fail. Then they came to ask questions. By winter, Iron Creek was earning more and wasting less. By the next spring, the herd was healthier. By the second year, the ranch had new contracts, better breeding stock, and a reputation no forged paper could touch. But the greatest change was quieter. Wade learned to bring her problems before they became disasters. Eleanor learned that help did not always come with a chain attached. At night, they sat at the same table where the first ledgers had been opened, and sometimes the work ended with numbers, sometimes with laughter, and sometimes with silence that felt like peace. Love came slowly. It came when Wade left coffee beside her books before dawn. It came when Eleanor mended his torn glove without saying a word. It came when he asked her opinion before a cattle sale. It came when she waited by the porch after his long rides, pretending she had only stepped out for air. Then one evening in late summer, they stood by the creek bend where she had first noticed the washing soil. The bank was repaired now. Young grass held the edge in place. The water moved quietly past them, clear and steady. Wade looked at her. "Do you still want 30 days?" Eleanor smiled. "No." His heart tightened. Then she took his hand. "I want the rest of them." Wade looked down at their joined hands, then back at the woman who had arrived as a debt and become the truest partner he had ever known. "So do I," he said. Years later, people across Montana would speak of Iron Creek as one of the strongest ranches in the territory. They would praise Wade Harrington's cattle, his horses, his land, and his judgment. But Wade always corrected them. "I built the ranch," he would say. "Eleanor taught it how to live." And when people asked Eleanor how she turned a threatened ranch into a rich one, she never spoke of revenge. She never called herself brilliant. She never mentioned the men who had laughed too soon. She only said, "Someone finally listened." That was the heart of it. They had sent Wade Harrington a bride they called useless, hoping she would ruin him. Instead, she saved his land, found her voice, and built a home where both of them could stand tall. And on quiet evenings, when the Montana wind moved through the cottonwoods and the horses shifted near the fence, Eleanor would touch the small silver leaf brooch at her shoulder and remember the day she stopped proving herself to people who never wanted the truth. She had not come west to be corrected. She had come west to be seen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional Wild West stories where love, courage, and justice meet on the frontier. And tell me in the comments, would you have trusted Eleanor before the whole town did? The last light faded over Iron Creek, turning the creek gold and the ranch house warm against the wide Montana sky. Wade stood beside Eleanor on the porch, their hands joined, watching the land they had saved together. For the first time in her life, Eleanor did not feel sent away. She felt chosen. And that was worth more than the richest ranch in Montana.